Good evening, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the headlines. The US House of Representatives voted to continue military support for Ukraine. Israel and Syria agree to a ceasefire as Israel allows Syrian troops limited access to Suwaida. Azerbaijan hosts the third edition Shusha Global Media Forum. The US House of Representatives has voted to continue military support for Ukraine, with the measure passing by 353 votes to 76. Republican Congressman Don Bacon announced the outcome on social media. The strong bipartisan backing is expected to ease the bill's progress in the Senate, where lawmakers can amend, approve or reject the text. If passed, the legislation will go to President Donald Trump for his signature. Russia launched a mass drone attack on the Ukrainian Black Sea port city of Odessa early on Saturday. A multi-storey apartment building was struck, killing at least one person. According to Mayor Hennady Trakhanov, the city is still compiling a list of casualties as emergency crews work in high alert mode. At least 20 drones targeted the city, which has been hit frequently in the past. Civilian infrastructure was damaged and rescuers were seen pulling people from a burning high-rise building. The regional emergency services later said 5 people were rescued, but one of them later died. One of the best defended cities in Ukraine, Kyiv, is also one of the cities hit the most. People from destroyed regions flock to the capital, but that only raises the risks to their survival. Let's take a closer look at the unpromised life underground for Kyiv's residents.
In the heart of Kiev, scenes resembling passages from history books have become a chilling nightly routine. 27-year-old Daria Slavitska, like many others, packs a yoga mat, blankets and food into a stroller and descends into the subway with her 2-year-old son Emil. She hopes to get a few hours of sleep underground as air raid sirens wail above. For over 2 months, Russia has pounded the capital with nighttime drone and missile attacks. These strikes are straining air defences and exhausting its 3.7 million residents. Kyiv, long considered Ukraine's safest city, is now bearing a heavier emotional and psychological toll.
We used to come here less often, about once a month. That was 6 months ago. Now we come here 2 or 3 times a week.
In scenes reminiscent of London's World War II Blitz bombings, thousands of Kyiv residents flee to deep metro stations each night. Slavitska's son, Emil, once terrified by sirens, has learned to accept them. She tells him the sounds are just thunder.
Before, when the Tu-95 bombers took off, they did not always target Kyiv. I do not remember the exact figures. If we remembered everything, we would have all died long ago. So we simply used to sit here. We just sat here. At 5 a.m. we went home and got some sleep. It was okay. Now it is no longer okay. Every single attack brings casualties.
In June, subway shelter visits surged to 165,000, more than double the previous month and 5 times higher than last year. The head of Kyiv's military administration confirmed the reason by saying that scale and lethality of strikes have grown. In just 6 months, 78 people were killed and over 400 injured. In April, a missile flattened a building just kilometers from Slavitska's home.
Imagine a situation where you go out into the street and a person is shot right in front of you. Seeing all this, what fear you experience, your heart sinks, your eyes bulge. People experience this every day, this feeling.
But the danger isn't only physical. The long-term stress and sleeplessness are starting to take a toll. A recent study found that 88% of Ukrainians now report very poor sleep.
Якщо недостаток сна, що в нас? У нас знов-таки
Sleep deprivation brings lack of concentration, memory, declined cognitive functions. It affects mood, causes mood swings, emotional downs, extreme anxiousness and apathy.
For Slavitska, the hope is modest. A thicker mattress to make the subway floor just a little more bearable, and maybe one quiet night without sirens.
We're joined live by Andriy Ordinovich, a retired colonel of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, to further discuss the war in Ukraine. Colonel, welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me. Good evening.
Now, Russia's preparing a summer offensive in Ukraine with 160,000 men. Thinking strategically, when should this offensive begin?
Actually, this offensive has already started. It's going on since end of May, beginning of June. And they are trying to get the main strategic operational focus, specifically to repel Ukrainian military from the temporary 4 provinces occupied, like Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Lugansk. They also would like to expand existing buffer zone, so-called buffer zone, in Kharkiv region and Sumy region. They also trying to push Ukraine during this offensive operation from the temporary, also occupied by Ukrainian forces, territory of Russian Federation in Kursk province, as well as Belgorod province. Primarily, they are following for the, as usual, for key strategic political objectives, which focus on demobilization of Ukrainian society. They are trying to attack critical infrastructure, and your program today exactly about it, how people are getting tired from this war. Second, they are trying to persuade the demoralization of the military, targeting mainly right now the recruiting points or recruiting offices, as well as they are trying to somehow discredit our political military leadership with the same approach. Primarily right now, this kind of offensive operation is going on in 3 directions. One of them, it is northeast, which touched by Sumy, Kharkiv region around Volchansk, as well as Kupiansk and Izum. They also are trying to follow the eastern direction. It is Donetsk, Toretsk, Kupiansk, Siversky Donetsk. And third, it is on south. This south direction built a quite long stable, right now became more fragile. It is Zaporizhia, it is Robotyno and Orekhiv. And mainly they're using Shaheds and different type of missiles to continue their terror efforts. Second, they are very much intensified to use glided bombs in the front line to destroy our infantry. They also increase numbers of EW equipment to interrupt our precise striking. They are applying small groups, heavy fighting in the urban area, and less right now artillery we can find, as well as more FPV, first view drones could be very active. And the overall and bottom line, they do have incremental gains versus very, very heavy human beings losses.
How are you viewing the Ukrainian army's capability, Colonel? Are they capable of fending off this threat?
You know, the short answer is yes. I would say that we have not ever thinking to give up. Second, the fighting war for us, I would rephrase, the expression of the former Premier Minister of Israel, Golda Meir, who mentioned that we intend to remain alive, but our neighbors want to see us as dead. This is not a question which leaves us very much room for compromise. And Ukraine are able and would be able to conduct targeted strike against Russia logistics, against Russia rear echelon, mainly focusing on command post, defense industry base enterprise, oil refinery, airfields, everything what could be called as a war machine. In the same time, Ukraine and Ukrainian military and Ukrainian industry trying to fielding up with new technology, and right now, like in the field of UAVs, you can find new deep strike as well as FPV drones, which are resilient against the EW Russian equipment. We are optimizing our combat military structure, shifting toward the Army Corps structure with improvement of training, different level of staffs. We are also scaling up some production, talking with our partners on different in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine. But more important, because if we do have human beings in place, we are improving our training system with involvement of NATO and EU countries.
Okay, Colonel, thank you so much for joining us on the programme. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has expressed doubt that Ukraine will join the EU before 2034. His remarks came after talks in Berlin with Romanian President Nicolae Dan, who urged the bloc to admit countries that meet accession criteria. Merz said ending the war in Ukraine remains the top priority and that full reconstruction could take years before membership is feasible.
Our top priority is to do everything we can to end this war. Then we will talk about the reconstruction of Ukraine, and this will certainly also be linked to a process at the end of which Ukraine can also become a member of the European Union. But that will take several years. As I said, the priority is to end the war. The second priority is to rebuild Ukraine and then embed all of this in an accession perspective.
The EU is putting forward its biggest budget plan yet, aiming high on defence, climate and innovation. But not everyone's on board. While some call it a bold step forward, others warn it could divide the bloc even further. Our Anita Sharma has the details.
Brussels unveils the EU's most ambitious long-term budget yet, nearly €2 trillion over 7 years to fund Europe's defence, green transition, competitiveness and migration response. But while some member states welcome this news, others warn it could fracture EU unity. Let's discuss the key features of this budget. The proposed total of €2 trillion for 2028 to 2034 is up roughly 64% from the current cycle, rising to 1.26% of EU gross national income. The major priorities are defence and space, with a fivefold increase, including €451 billion for a competitiveness fund and €131 billion specifically for defence and space. For climate and biodiversity, 35% of the budget would be for green objectives. Migration border control would see triple funding to manage ongoing arrivals and crises. On research and innovation, the Horizon Fund would be tripled to keep Europe competitive. As for Ukraine, roughly €100 billion would be earmarked for reconstruction and aid in Kyiv's EU accession. The revenue plan would see no increase in national contributions. Instead, they'd be funded by new own resources, such as corporate tax on firms, with 100 million euros plus turnover, digital levies, tobacco duties, carbon pricing, and e-waste charges. Let's discuss who is welcoming these new measures and who isn't. Hint, it's the same players. France and the European People's Party, or EPP, are in favor, with France highlighting defense, competitiveness, farmers, and new EU taxes as positive steps. The center-right EPP supports a moderately increased budget and more own resources to counter global competition. European Council President Antonio Costa emphasizes the budget as a key political choice, shaping Europe's future. Now for the pushback from frugal and fiscal hawks. Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, and other fiscally conservative states oppose common borrowing and further national contributions. Germany criticizes corporate taxes and tobacco levies, calling them, quote, the wrong signal. As for the Netherlands, they say the focus should be on smarter use of existing funds, not spending more. Sweden demands rule of law safeguards and smart targeted funding, not what it calls budget inflation. And finally, Hungary denounces the draft. Prime Minister Viktor Orban claims it's tilted in favor of Ukraine and warns it could ruin the EU if unchanged. So the key flashpoints are new own resources versus national contributions. The Commission proposes revenue drawn directly from EU-level taxes, but skeptics say these sources are untested and may fall short, leaving a €400 billion funding gap. On nuclear energy funding, the plan opens the door to finance national nuclear projects. While Germany rejects this, France and Sweden are supportive. On defense borrowing, leaders like France and the EPP are pushing for joint borrowing to fund increased defense spending, but Germany and northern states caution this should not become a permanent mechanism. The deal still needs unanimous approval from 27 member states and consent from the European Parliament. Negotiations will stretch over months with Council working groups, finance and agriculture ministers, and Parliament debates through 2027. The key battlegrounds: size of the budget envelope and new taxes, scope of climate versus agriculture spending, defense and strategic autonomy funding versus national sovereignty concerns, and energy funding, including nuclear support cuts. All this could be seen as Europe's defining fiscal blueprint for the decade, balancing internal cohesion, global competitiveness, security, and climate ambitions, all while trying to resolve differences between the member states. From Lake Lugano in Italy, I'm Anita Sharma for A News. Now, back to Baku.
Syria's Interior Ministry says security forces have begun deploying in the southern province of Sueda, following intense clashes between Druze, Bedouin groups and government forces that have left hundreds dead. The Syrian presidency announced an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire on Saturday. Just hours earlier, US Special Envoy for Syria Tom Barrack said Israel and Syria had agreed to a truce after days of bloodshed in the predominantly Druze region. Barrack said the ceasefire was supported by Washington and welcomed by Turkey, Jordan and Syria's neighbours. US President Donald Trump has said that another 10 hostages will soon be released from Gaza. Speaking at a White House dinner with Republican lawmakers, President Donald Trump praised the work of his special envoy, Steve Witkoff. The announcement comes as Israel warns of major hurdles in ongoing talks in Doha, accusing Hamas of stalling. Trump gave no further details, though his administration is pushing for a 60-day ceasefire.
Everybody's going to stay good and healthy. Gaza, we got most of the hostages back. We're going to have another 10 coming very shortly, and we hope to have that finished pretty quickly. And Steve Witkoff has been fantastic. He's done a great job in that. He's a very good man, good deal maker. I said I need a good deal maker with a good personality, and there aren't too many of them, but Steve is, and he's done a great job.
The Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebel group have pledged to sign a peace agreement by the 18th of August. A declaration of principles was signed in Doha after months of Qatari mediation. While the document outlines a timeline, it leaves unresolved whether M23 forces, allegedly backed by Rwanda, will withdraw from eastern Congo. US President Donald Trump has said he hopes peace would draw Western investment to the mineral-rich region. M23 has held Goma since January and expanded across North and South Kivu. Rwanda denies backing the group. As the promise of peace nears citizens are hopeful, but a level of scepticism remains. Citizens in Bukavu hope that this time the peace will be sustainable.
A declaration of principles was signed in Doha after months of Qatari mediation. For residents of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the news brings the promise of long-awaited relief. However, not everyone is optimistic. In Bukavu, residents reacted with caution, urging both parties to be sincere in their commitments.
We are beginning to fear that if one side releases political prisoners and the other does not, what would happen to the one who did not respect the agreement. But also, we continue to ask the AFCM-23 to be very sincere in its commitments, and the Kinshasa government to also be sincere and not repeat what we experienced last time, when we were told there would be a ceasefire while weapons continued to fire here and there.
Others noted that the agreement remains provisional.
My reaction is to wait for a final agreement. But until now, they are still only at an agreement in principle. When will the final agreement come? Because we, the common people, are suffering. If they are still at the stage of an agreement in principle, when will the final agreement come? The population expected a final agreement to be signed soon. The household basket here in Bukavu is becoming a headache. There is no work, all banks are closed, cooperatives too. It's hard to move around to find something to eat. We've had enough.
Civil society representative Amos Bisimwa warned both sides are still reinforcing troops.
At the same time as we are told that an agreement will be signed, the two parties in conflict continue to reinforce their troops on the ground. You have heard the accusations from Kinshasa against the AFCM-23, but also those from the AFCM-23 against the Congolese government, which it also accuses of reinforcing its troops. This shows that even if we are told that an agreement was signed today, 3 days or a week later, hostilities risk resuming on the ground, and it is the population that will continue to pay the price.
US President Donald Trump has said he hopes peace would draw Western investment to the mineral-rich region. M23 has held Goma since January and expanded across North and South Kivu. Rwanda denies backing the group.
The third Shusha Global Media Forum has officially opened today, bringing together over 140 international delegates from 52 countries to discuss the future of media in the digital era. President Ilham Aliyev answered questions from the forum participants during the opening session.
The discussions at the Shusha Global Media Forum, held under the theme Digital Pathways, Strengthening Information and Media Resilience in the Age of AI, once again demonstrated the urgent need for open dialogue in a constructive and respectful atmosphere, covering not only media-related matters, but also broader global issues. In this context, President Aliyev answered a series of questions from international journalists. One of the most notable questions came from a Ukrainian journalist who, reflecting on the ongoing war, asked what advice Azerbaijan's leader could offer to Ukraine and its people during such a difficult time. President Aliyev emphasized the importance of never giving in and never reconciling with occupation. Ubay Shabandar, a news correspondent in Washington, D.C., asked whether Azerbaijan and the United States can enter a new era of relations and become strong partners once again.
That's actually what we are hoping for. I think now, taking into account several months of our interaction with the representatives of Trump's administration, clearly demonstrate that we are on the right path. We are back to normal relations. You know that the previous U.S. administration almost ruined U.S.-Azerbaijani ties. High-ranking officials from State Department were publicly saying that there'll be no business as usual with Azerbaijan again. And that was because we restored our sovereignty and territorial integrity.
The discussion then moved to a question regarding the approach of Western media toward Azerbaijan.
Western public opinion and influenced by Western media is extremely negative and unfair to Azerbaijan. And we tried to change it, but it doesn't work. And not because we were not active, we've been very active, but because there are certain rules and procedures in European political spectrum which dictated to demonize Azerbaijan and to spread rumors and different, how to say, fake stories about our country.
He underlined that following Western advice without question could have led Azerbaijan into conflicts with neighboring states, a path the country firmly rejected. Addressing questions about energy policy, President Aliyev underlined that Azerbaijan's approach to natural gas exports has always been purely commercial and free from political motives.
With respect to Russian-European Union relationship on natural gas, we never took this factor as something which we should take into account. We were never trying to compete with Russia, even when Russia was supplying 150 plus billion cubic meters to Europe, and we never were offering our service to substitute. No. For us, it's absolutely commercial. We always treated our energy policy as business-oriented. We never politicized it, never cut the gas supply to those whom probably we didn't like much. We always looked at as commercial and always observed our obligations. So there've been never any disruption in supplies to any country.
Ilham Aliyev also spoke about Azerbaijan's sovereign control over strategic infrastructure projects. He made it clear that the Zangezur corridor would remain fully under Azerbaijan's management, stating that there would be no operators, no leases, and no external control over this vital route. All projects would be carried out independently by Azerbaijan. Responding to a question about the recent air crash, the president noted that Azerbaijani authorities are aware that Russian officials have clear knowledge of what occurred.
Under threat. Unfortunately, we didn't get any answer from Russian officials about that, though it's already 7 months have passed. For us, everything is clear. We know what happened, and we can prove it. And we know that Russian officials knows what happened.
President Aliyev emphasized that New Caledonia should continue its pursuit of independence, noting that recent developments between France and New Caledonia mark only the beginning of its story. The Shusha Global Forum reaffirmed its role as a vital platform for dialogue, providing a space for open discussions and highlighting Azerbaijan's vision and independent approach on both regional and global matters.
Our own Orkan Amashov joins us live to tell us everything about the first day of the high-profile event from Shusha. Orkan, what's the difference about this year compared to the previous editions of the Shusha Global Media Forum?
Hello, Dilek. Good evening. What a day have we had. It was the day one, of course, and a major difference, of course, of this Shusha Global Media Forum in terms of the location of the day one. Day one event was President Ilham Aliyev's Q&A session, which lasted for about 2 hours and 45 minutes, and the venue was Khankandi Congress Center. During the first 2 editions of Shusha Global Media Forum, all the major events, including the opening day events, used to take place in Shusha. This was the first of Shusha Global Media Forum's event taking place outside Shusha, but it's a normal practice, of course. And I imagine that this practice will continue from now on. So Khankandi as a location was a vivid embodiment of the new Azerbaijan's new aspirations, and also, of course, circumstances on the ground in this region, because President Aliyev was responding to the questions of the representatives of international media, extensively talked about the recovery of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity and sovereignty, about what the separatist elements were trying to do here. He talked extensively about the peace process. Therefore, I think that the choice of the location as Khankandi, as for the purpose of day one, as opposed to Shusha, had a meaning, and that meaning was very clear to everybody. And I think that on this occasion we have more guests from different countries. As I think my colleagues mentioned a couple of times throughout the day today, I think there are around 140 foreign representatives from 50 countries in Khankandi today, and they're going to be in Shusha tomorrow for the opening ceremony, because today's day one's characteristic could be described as a welcoming day. And also, of course, the major developments that are going to take place tomorrow will be completely centered around artificial intelligence and different modes of new media, its impact on our daily life, and also, of course, technology and its impact on the quality and of journalism and media ethics. And those subjects will be discussed tomorrow. But today's major event, of course, what dominated today was President Aliyev's 2-hour, 45-minute interview, the press briefing, Q&A session with journalists. I think that we can actually outline the general picture on the basis of 4 or 5 essential elements. He talked about Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process. He mentioned in the clearest possible way that Abu Dhabi meeting was indeed a success. It reflected very positively. But I think it's very clear that unless Azerbaijan's fundamental demands, which are extra treaty demands, those demands relate to OSCE, Minsk Group, and also, of course, the Armenian constitution, which contains territorial claim was Azerbaijan. If those obstacles are not removed, there will be no peace treaty. And I think that there was a journalist from Georgia, Basadze, Mr. Basadze, when he posed this question about that Azerbaijani and Georgian interests go hand in hand. And after Abu Dhabi meeting, it could be said with absolute confidence that interests of Azerbaijan and Armenia should go hand in hand. But President Aliyev reflected historically. He actually referred to that stadium, which is not far away from the Khankandi Congress Center, making reference to Prime Minister Pashinyan's speech delivered in 2018, wherein he said that Karabakh is a stop. And he said that, yes, Armenia changed massively over the past few years. He also referred to Prime Minister Pashinyan's latest statement, in which Pashinyan said that he should have recognized Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, including Karabakh, earlier than this. And President Aliyev said that, yes, he should have listened to me, from which actually it could emerge with elegant inevitability that Azerbaijan wants more clarity from Armenia, and Azerbaijan wants crystal clear guarantees. Yes, indeed, he talked about Zengezur corridor. He didn't say specifically anything about that American proposal as such. What he said was that Azerbaijan would not allow for any country to assume, or any entity, any foreign entity, to assume control over Azerbaijan's sovereign territory. There will be no section of transport within Azerbaijan controlled or leased out to any foreign entity, but Armenia has to decide on its own. I don't necessarily think that we can make a very decisive conclusion on the basis of that, but what he said was very clear and was a reiteration of Azerbaijan's fundamental Zengezur essentials. He said that we need to travel from Azerbaijan to Azerbaijan, in other words, from Azerbaijan's mainland to Nakhchivan exclave. That road must be unobstructed, and we shouldn't see, there should be no Armenian control. And actually, what he said there, I vividly remember, he said that our citizens should not face the face of Armenian border guards. I mean, from all of this sort of, cumulatively, on the basis of this amalgamation of comments, could we confidently say that Azerbaijan is against any form of for an entity control over that overland passage? And I'm not entirely sure. I think that Azerbaijan would be willing to be more focused on some sort of arrangement which will not have any third-party element, undoubtedly. But President Aliyev's comments were strictly about Azerbaijani territory, recognized as sovereign part of Azerbaijan. There were many other interesting moments, of course. His comments about Russia-Ukraine conflict. I think one of the first questions, actually, was about what would be his advice to Ukrainians. And he said that never accept the occupation. And interestingly enough, he also talked extensively about Azerbaijan-Russia tensions and made it very clear that as long as that apology with the guilt admitted, compensations being paid, and also those responsible brought to accountability. Those three conditions not fulfilled. As long as they are not fulfilled, these tensions will not ease. I think President Aliyev was very clear about that topic as well. And connectivity, of course, one of the key elements of his articulations made during day one and the 17th summit of the Economic Cooperation Organization, Azerbaijan's role within D8, and many other elements were reflected upon very, very extensively. And I think that by and large, when there was a question about what Azerbaijan is planning to do or what would Azerbaijan do to change European public opinion about Azerbaijan, his answer, I think, received very positive reaction from many delegates that I have managed to speak to after that session was over. I mean, what is very clear from President Aliyev's responses, Azerbaijan has achieved a certain degree of self-sufficiency. Azerbaijan is not particularly concerned about what other countries think about Azerbaijan, as long as Azerbaijan is doing the right thing. And what he made very clear is that Azerbaijan operating within the sovereign borders of its own territory, and Azerbaijan is not endangering any other country. Azerbaijan is not trying to impose its will on any other country, and therefore Azerbaijan should be respected. And of course, what he said regarding one of the last questions put to him was by a representative of New Caledonia, wherein he expressed his support, reiterated that support, and said that it's only the beginning of the journey for New Caledonia. And the current arrangement, wherein, of course, as we know, New Caledonia is recognized as a state within the French Republic, is just the beginning of a long journey. In terms of Azerbaijani gas being supplied for European needs, I think President Aliyev was reflecting on the exigencies emanating from realpolitik. He said that, yes, indeed, we will have extra 8 BCM, but of course, we need to establish which markets are ready to accept it. And he also extensively talked about European policy based on not financing fossil fuel projects. And I think that one of the key moments of that very, very important Q&A session was my colleague Ubi Shabanda's question to President Ilham Aliyev about his expectation for the future of US-Azerbaijan relations, and some positive notes have been reflected there. And President Aliyev very interestingly compared the case of Ukraine with Azerbaijan, saying that Azerbaijan recovered its territorial integrity, after which Biden administration, or particular member of Biden administration, said that there will be no more business as usual with Azerbaijan, but Ukraine received support for the protection of its territorial integrity. And I think that by and large, in the final analysis, we could say that fundamentally we were not surprised, but certain fundamental linchpins have been reiterated. No full normalization with Russia is likely to take place. Azerbaijan has got some expectations. Connectivity projects will continue. Some sort of a strong, realistic, crystal clear precepts that dominate Azerbaijan's foreign policy regarding Europe will also, of course, continue. But very, very importantly, I think this should be reiterated. President Aliyev's reflections about OSCE Minsk Group, I think, will be referred to by political analysts. He specifically mentioned that particular moment before 2020. What he said was that when the OSCE co-chairs made a statement saying that status quo back then, before 2020, was not acceptable, Azerbaijan was very encouraged. But when they said it is no longer tenable, it is not sustainable, that was a different story. sort of this linguistic transformation from the point of status quo being not acceptable, being utterly unacceptable, to being not sustainable, I think had some sort of bearing on Azerbaijani thinking as well. And yes, Dilek, please, sorry.
Okay, Orkan, that was a great roundup. We can leave it there for this evening, and no doubt we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Now, the fighting in Syria attracts serious attention from regional countries. Earlier, Azerbaijan has reaffirmed support for Syria's sovereignty and stability. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan has released a statement in response to the media inquiry on Israeli-Syrian escalation. To unpack the dynamic in Azerbaijan-Syria relations, we go to Togrul Valikanli, STEM Analytical Centre guest expert. Togrul, thank you for being with us this evening. How does Azerbaijan...
Good evening, thank you.
How does Azerbaijan view its role in contributing to Syria's stability and peace efforts?
Yeah, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Azerbaijan stated that Azerbaijan expresses support for territorial integrity and sovereignty of Syria. Strong borders and political stability are a crucial point, not only for the Syrian people, but also for regional security and the reliability of global governance. And the territorial integrity of and sovereignty of Arabic Republic of Syria are fundamental aspects to ensuring the lasting peace and development in the region. And Syria's border and internal political stability or steadiness are essential to preventing further conflicts, foreign reinforcement, and any kind of future fragmentation. So generally, a unified and sovereign Syria it can contribute to regional security, assist in managing cross-border threats, and promote cooperation in the Middle East region. And in this issue, it's worth to mentioning the role of Turkey and Arab states of the region to ensure or to promote the sustainable peace and stability, because Syrian case involved many countries, even non-Arabic countries like Iran and Russia and Western partners. That's why the main point or the main issue is territorial integrity and stability of Syria.
And what benefits might Azerbaijan gain by voicing strong support for Syria at this time?
As I said, the integrity of Syria is some kind of guarantee for regional prosperity and for development of the relations between Syria and other non-Arabic states such as Azerbaijan.
Okay, and lastly,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I thought you had finished your answer.
No, I finished, actually.
Okay, lastly, how could this support influence future Azerbaijani-Syrian relations?
I think there's a new chapter between Syria and Azerbaijan, and their promotion of bilateral relations is guaranteed only under the conditions of sovereignty of Syria and integrity.
Okay, Togrul, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Fitch forecasts Armenia's budget deficit rising to 5.4% of GDP in 2025, before averaging at 4.4% in 2026 and 27. Meanwhile, public debt is set to climb from 48% last year to 51.3% in 2025, reaching 54.2% by 2027, according to Fitch. External vulnerabilities remain elevated, with net external debt averaging 28.4% of GDP over the 2025-27 period. Meanwhile, international reserves reached $4 billion in June, marking a 12% year-on-year increase. Fitch reaffirmed Armenia's BB rating with a stable outlook, projecting a 4.7% GDP growth through 2027. Extreme heat is turning into a silent crisis across Central Asia. A new World Bank report warns that without urgent action, cities could see soaring death rates, crumbling infrastructure and massive job losses in decades ahead.
Cities across Central Asia are facing mounting dangers from extreme heat, threatening lives, livelihoods and infrastructure. A new World Bank report covering 70 urban areas, including Central Asian cities Astana, Bishkek, Ashgabat and Tashkent, warns that without urgent adaptation, the situation will worsen dramatically. Heat-related deaths are already significant. In Ashgabat, around 25 to 28 people per 100,000 die annually due to high temperatures. Other cities like Astana and Tashkent are not far behind, with 19 to 21 deaths. Report claims by 2090 these numbers could escalate, with annual fatalities reaching as high as 23,000 in some cities. The economic toll of rising temperatures is also growing rapidly. In 2023 alone, extreme heat led to the loss of over 87,000 full-time jobs across Europe and Central Asia. Uzbekistan lost around 22,200 jobs and Turkey 16,100, while Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan and Cyprus also displayed significant expected working hour losses in the construction sector. Infrastructure is buckling under the pressure. Kyrgyzstan loses nearly 200 kilometres of road each year due to heat damage. Kazakhstan is also seeing roads warp and crack, especially in the south and northeast. The World Bank urges immediate action. More green spaces, heat-resilient buildings and better early warning systems could make cities safer and more livable in a warming future.
President Ersin Tatar of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus issued a firm statement in New York, confirming that the TRNC will continue shaping its own future. He emphasised that any formal negotiations must begin with the recognition of two sovereign states in Cyprus. He declared, quote, "There are two states. The existence of these two states have been a reality for 62 years. In western Georgia's hills, a quiet revolution is brewing. Once a tea powerhouse of the Soviet Union, the Guria region saw its plantations abandoned and factories destroyed after independence. But today, a new generation is determined to revive the lost aroma of Georgian tea.
In the subtropical heartland of Guria, the whispers of a forgotten industry echo through abandoned corridors. Once home to the Soviet Union's only tea research institute, Anasoli is now a shell of its former self, its labs decaying, its legends fading.
It was only one whole Soviet Union researching institute for tea and another subtropical culture. And with huge laboratories, different laboratories. It was experimental fields for tea, for different plants. It was experimental tea factories and a lot of tea.
For Lika Megraladze, this was once just her mother's workplace. But as the Soviet Union fell, so did Georgia's tea empire. By 2016, production had dropped by 99% compared to its 1985 peak. But now, 3 decades later, a new wave of tea entrepreneurs is restoring what was lost. Among them, Nika Sioridze and Baka Babunashvili. Backed by a government grant, their company is cultivating hope on 28 hectares of revived land.
Georgia was very famous of tea. During Soviet Union, here was big industry of tea. Here in our region, in Ozurgeti, here was 28 factory, big factory, and every day they collected tea.
Inside a wing of an old silk factory, the scent of innovation is in the air. The goal now is not mass production, but quality.
They made just a simple black and simple green tea, and it was not high quality, and it was actually low quality tea. But in 2016, our government started tea rehabilitation program.
Tourism too is blending into the business. Lika now offers tea tours and tastings from her own small plantation. What began as a Soviet experiment is now a grassroots revival. In the hills of Guria, Georgia's tea isn't just growing again, it's evolving.
That's all we have for now from Baku. Stay tuned to A News for more updates and have a wonderful evening.